News Talk 92.3 KTAR. Continuing coverage on the Bruce St. James Show. Bin Laden is dead.
All right, let's jump right into this. Joining us is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He is the president and founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Lives right here in the Valley. Dr. Jasser, thank you for joining us today.
It's nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
It is an interesting day, my guess, as a not only as a Muslim, but from somebody who has been in the middle of this debate on the war on terror, the way that the American public perceives Muslims and Arab Americans specifically. I'm curious just to get your initial thoughts on when you heard the news last night, what you thought.
Well, I can't tell you enough how elated, relieved I was, not only as an American but as a Muslim, to see this fascist who has perpetrated a war against our country, a country that my family came to because we could practice our faith more freely here than anywhere in the world. And we formed our organization after 9/11 in order to counter the ideas of radical Islam that are embodied by the image and the actions of Bin Laden. So it was relief. It was the beginning of a closure of a chapter on radicalization, but I think that we shouldn't be complacent. The threat to our homeland has only been increasing exponentially in the past few years, and it's sort of like a hydra. You cut one head and you get two others that are coming up.
Yeah, and I think that's a concern for a lot of people. I echo your sentiments, and I would tell you that I learned that there's a difference between Muslim and radical Islam, and that it's a huge difference, and that it is important for us as Americans to understand that difference. I appreciate the work you do. I'll refer to you as a moderate. How's that? Of standing up to Usama Bin Laden and Al Qaeda and this knowledge, this accepted thought that goes through the Arab world that the West is evil and the infidels. And how do you combat that? You seem like, and don't take this the wrong way, you seem like a lone voice in the wilderness a lot of the times when we hear people speaking on behalf of the Muslim faith. We don't hear a lot of the positive.
Yeah, and I think this is why we're trying to get more traction in what we're doing, because I believe the vast majority of Muslims have not been represented by many of the organizations that have simply been more focused on victimization and minority issues, and really have not been taking on the ideas frontally, taking on Bin Ladenism or the ideologies that are a slippery slope that create this. So Americans have sort of been left in a in the middle there between two extremes. Of one extreme in America that thinks that every Muslim is a terrorist and they're wrong, and the other extreme that thinks that no Muslim could be a terrorist and it's not any part of the religion. And I don't think it's part of my religion, but Islam, as you just mentioned, is a very diverse faith. That we don't have a clergy, we don't have a central leadership, and I'm thankful for that. But at the end of the day, we need to start marginalizing the ideas that create the Bin Ladens of the world. I mean, now after Bin Laden, the most threatening imam in the world is Imam Anwar al-Awlaki.
Yeah.
And before he became a jihadist, he was giving sermons in mosques in Denver and San Diego and then Northern Virginia. Before he was preaching violent extremism, he had an ideology that drove him down that radicalization, and we need to counter that. And I think that, and ultimately Americans, I think, realize that only Muslims can counter that, and that's why we have to engage Islam and not marginalize it.
We're talking to Dr. Zuhdi Jasser from the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Joe Huizenga, you have a question?
Yeah, Dr. Jasser, why don't you think we, in the media and the general public hear more about those things that you just brought up there with al-Awlaki and those things?
Well, I think it's because we were not schooled anymore in how to discuss religion without tripping over ourselves in political correctness. We saw that with the hearings that we had a month ago that I testified in Congress. And even look now, the president and our government seem to be worried about making a statement that this barbarian got an Islamic burial.
Right.
And I don't understand that. I'm curious of what Muslim would ever say a prayer over it. If we look at the Mumbai bombings of the synagogue, they could not bury the terrorists in any cemeteries because no imams in India would bury them because they wouldn't read Quran, and yet our government, because of political correctness, is more worried about making sure that we don't offend the radicals.
Right.
And I think it's preventing us from dissecting the theopolitical ideology that threatens us.
I think a lot of people just stood up and cheered when you said that, by the way, because there's a lot of folks that say, why are we bending over backwards to afford him a funeral that certainly was never afforded to the victims either, of his words. Dr. Jasser, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us a little bit of that insight, and we wish you the best of luck continuing the good work you're doing.
It's a pleasure. pleasure. Thank you.
All right.